Hey there, this is Jay from Filmstrip dropping in to let you know you're about to hear a classic episode from our archives. Some of these shows were produced before we called the show Filmstrip Podcast, before we used popcorn ratings, had the standard intro song from Frozen Lake 121, or really even knew what we were doing recording and editing the show. However, there's a lot of fun in them, and we hope you enjoy. Just wanted to let you know in case you noticed the differences. Now, on to the show.
Robert, I don't think this is very funny. Bobby. Who is this?
As you watch the screen, your heart begins to beat faster. There's a fluttering in the pit of your stomach. Your throat is dry. Your palms damp. Suddenly a chill runs down your spine. You clutch the person next to you. You tell yourself, it's only a movie. It's only a movie. But sooner or later, it's time to go home.
Welcome to Filmstrip. I'm Jay.
And I'm Anna.
And this is our review of When a Stranger Calls, starring Camilla Bell, Brian Garrity, Katie Cassidy, Clark Gregg, Tommy Flanagan, and the voice of Lance Henriksen. Directed by Simon West, released in 2006 on a budget of $15 million, grossed $67 million at the box office, but was universally panned by critics. So, Anna, let's talk a little bit about this. At the end of our first episode in this retrospective, when we talked about the original, we talked about the remake and some of the things that we thought they could do, and then we went through that sequel and we've torn that apart. But we're back here in this, and this film came out in that glut of PG-13 horror that flooded theaters in the wake of Scream and everything else along those lines. I Know What You Did Last Summer and all of that kind of stuff. And by the time this one came out, that little era of horror had almost run its course completely. And I've often thought that the panning of this film may be the fact that it came out in that era, and that it also makes the dreaded decision in horror is to go PG-13. So I don't know, this is your first time seeing it. Just in general, what do you think? Was it a good idea to go back to a remake of it? Was it a story worth telling again?
Yes, I think this was a very good remake, actually. It kind of made more, and I'll get into it more into the podcast, but there were a lot of things I think they did right. My only complaint where this is different, and we've said this before, is they made, granted, a shorter movie. It kind of drug out a little bit, especially towards the middle. It kind of drug just a little bit, but it was still a fairly short movie and it moved quickly and they did a lot of stuff right, but it just in the middle part it just drug. There's only so many scenes you can have where they play the haunting music and something's going to happen, and like it's the cat or it's the maid or it's this or that.
Well, I think you've hit on something. Is they realize, the makers of this film, and it should be noted, Fred Walton, who created the original and then did the sequel, had nothing to do with this. There's no mention of him really as a part of any of this, except that he created characters or whatever. But he doesn't even get that credit, if I remember right. What Simon West and his crew did, and particularly Jake Wade Wall, who wrote this, and he's also responsible for writing the remake of The Hitcher, which is another one of those that came out in that that mix there. They knew that the best part of this story was the babysitter in the house being stalked. And instead of blowing all that in the first 20 minutes, which the last two films did, and then having nowhere to go, they decided we're going to build the whole movie around that. And I will say now, that to me has always struck me as the, kind of a duh moment, but also the genius of this film is that they realize, look, the hook of this is in the house. So they know they've got to build the whole thing around that, and I agree with you. As far as horror remakes go, this is one of the better ones I've ever seen. And I'll spoil that out of the gate now. I happen to think a lot of this one and the things they do over some of the other stuff I've seen through the years.
Oh yeah, there were a lot of things I noticed that I was like, yeah, the other movies should have done that.
I agree, and before we get any further into the discussion about it, Anna, let's flip this thing on its head a little bit. Since it is a remake, why don't you read the plot summary this time?
Okay. The film opens on the story of a babysitter and the children she was watching who are found brutally murdered. When the police arrest the perpetrator, they learn he used his bare hands to tear them to pieces. Meanwhile, Jill Johnson is a teenage girl in a crisis, having her boyfriend Bobby cheat on her with her best friend Tiffany. To top it off, Jill has gone 800 minutes over on her cell phone plan, for which her father, Ben, has her take a babysitting job for a wealthy doctor to pay off the debt. Because she has to work out in the middle of nowhere, Jill can't attend the big bonfire event with her friends. She meets the doctor and his wife, and they show her around the elaborate mansion, and they inform her the children are already asleep. Not long after the parents leave, Jill starts receiving anonymous phone calls. Her friend Tiffany comes over to visit, but Jill asks her to leave, not wanting to get into any more trouble. A storm has blocked Tiffany's exit down the driveway, and when she goes to clear the branch, she is attacked by an unknown person and killed. The calls continue, and each one becomes more alarming as Jill gets the impression she is being watched. Jill calls the police, who tell her they can trace the call if she keeps the caller on the line for more than 60 seconds. Jill succeeds in this, and the police inform her the calls are coming from inside the house. Jill finds Tiffany's dead body upstairs and is attacked by the stranger. She gets the kids and they run to the greenhouse, where Jill finds the maid is also dead. Jill manages to lock the stranger inside the greenhouse, but he quickly escapes and attacks Jill. There is a struggle, and Jill manages to stab the stranger with an iron poker before running out of the house into the waiting arms of the police, who promptly take the stranger into custody. Jill wakes up in the hospital to phone ringing. She nervously picks it up but hears nothing. We see her reflection in the mirror and that the stranger is behind her. He grabs her. Jill screams hysterically, which actually wakes her up in the hospital, where we see she is restrained. The doctors and nurses work frantically to calm her down, leaving us to wonder if the encounter with the stranger has cost Jill her sanity.
Just hearing you read that, it sounds way more interesting than anything we've watched up to this point.
Yes.
I mean, it flows so much better. And I know it's blasphemy in horror circles to ever say the remake is better than the original, but I'm going to say it now. It's a more satisfying, complete film this time around because, like I said in the intro there, the crux of this movie, they know that the real money of it is the girl in the house. And yeah,
the other thing, as I'm reading the plot summary, and thinking about this, think of all the stuff we critiqued in the other movies. Like we say they pay it off, and the best part is the girl, the babysitter in the house. And this whole movie is basically the babysitter in the house, which is number one, good. Number two, remember when we were doing when a stranger calls back, we were saying that we should have had one of the girls to kill the crazy ventriloquist stranger guy. And in this one, Jill apparently, pokes him so that the police with the poker and gets the kids out, and actually checks on the kids and gets out, which was one of the things we critiqued in the second movie. And like you said, it's a more complete movie. And the thing I noticed that really struck me about this movie is that the house is kind of a character in it. They made this elaborate mansion with, it's very she's walking through it, doing the typical babysitter stuff where she's trying on the jewelry and stuff. First off, as the road is winding up to the house, you get that it's isolated, that it's in a very isolated place. Then all the glass and mirrors and the water on the lake, and then the modernness of the house where you walk in a room and the lights pop on or something. It's its own character, and I think that is the major thing they did. One of the major top 3 definitely things they did right with this movie is they made the house a character, because you can't tell me this house ends with the glass and looking across and seeing the figure is not, and the alarm system and everything is not a major point and creepier than the first house.
I agree that it is a major character. I will say this, the tension that builds in that first living room, because we feel like the world is getting smaller around Jill in that first movie. All of that's done by lighting, and I think some of that is the necessity of having no budget and just having to do things quick and cheap. That they really worked with the lighting and it worked. This one works on the opposite end. We've got money now. We spend it on a really nice set. I think this is an actual house, and they had this gorgeous looking idea of, let's have a house that's no longer closed off and dark like the first one, and forget the second one with its little weird living room stuff, but have one that's open so you feel like hey, there's plenty of room, I can see what's going on. But the other side of that is it makes you overexposed. And I'm also going to say something else, and this may be reading deeper into it than what they want, but that's sort of the knock of the Jill's generation, is that they're the overexposed, everything's out in the open, so nothing's supposed to surprise them. Well, the same things can still sneak up on them. And even though it's all this glass and light and everything everywhere, the guy pretty well hides from her for bulk of the film until he starts chasing her through the house. And I agree with you. It makes the tension different, and it works better because now we don't just confine her to one room or the kitchen, and we let her run around, and Jill takes a little ownership for herself. And I kind of like the fact that they set it up. The whole setting is neat. And part of that is the way they open the film. In the opening credits, it's, a voiceover from like phone calls, and you hear this girl being harassed, and basically we're told that this guy has killed this entire family. We see these cops come in, and one of them walks away and he's shaking, and I loved it because it's like this portly detective. It's sort of this callback to Brian.
To Charles Durning.
Yeah, not Brian Dennehy, to the other fat gray-headed guy, to Charles Durning. And your callback, you said before it looked like they were carrying the kids out in garbage bags. This time they actually are, which is really creepy. I like it.
And that was another thing I really liked about this one too, is, and I until I watched this one, it didn't register. I'm like, oh, this makes much more sense. It's this crazy serial killer.
Yeah.
Apparently. And he's gone, and he did all that. He did all that stuff with the family. And I like the creepy way, like you see, I mean, I have them with my kids all over my house, is, the creepy, it's not creepy, but it's the family portrait. And then the hard cop, the callback to Charles Durning, the throwback to Charles Durning is going in, and you get he's old, he's gray-headed, he's overweight, he's obviously been in this business for a long time, and he opens the door, and yet they don't show you anything, but just the look on his face from the horror of that is just, it's just leaves so much to the imagination. And putting that before all this happens, and then kind of setting that up, I think was a really good idea, and it would have made a whole lot more sense in the first movie.
Exactly. And the thing is, they spend so much of the time in the middle part of the first movie explaining Kurt Duncan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about how weak that made him. One, because the guy portraying him was sick, and he looked weakly and not weakly. He looked, too thin and kind of sickly and weak and
fragile.
Stuff. Yeah, and fragile. There you go. And in this one, they don't explain it at all. They don't explain anything about this dude outside of this. and you only get really one good shot of his face at the very end. And I love that because they know that it really isn't about him. It's about the girl and the terror, and he is just this force. And I mean, that's a borrowed lift out of the original Halloween, is that we knew almost nothing about the Michael Myers character other than just a few drop lines that they gave us. And it made it so much more scary because he could just be anybody. That was the whole point. And that's the thing here, is it doesn't matter who he is. It's just that he killed somebody. We go to 150 miles away to meet Jill, and we know somehow he's going to get there to her. And that's the creepy part of it. And then they do the other smart thing. They build us some characters and some teenage characters with some actual teenage drama here.
Exactly. That was going to be my other point as well. I like that they built the characters and gave them kind of a backstory.
Yeah, I mean, Jill is like a track running girl or whatever, and we see her trying to get a lap in around the top of the gym, and she's staring at the boy, and obviously we know this is her guy or her crush or whatever. And finally, we give Bobby a face. It's the same character names, and then we add in two more girls, Tiffany and her friend Scarlett. And what we find out is that Bobby has, hooked up or cheated on Jill with Tiffany, played by Katie Cassidy. Now, Katie Cassidy, I've seen in a bunch of horror movies. She was in the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street. She's been in some other stuff. She was in Gossip Girl, and she's been in all those kind of things. She was in Black Christmas. I mean, she's kind of done those things. But she's really neat. Her dad's David Cassidy, if you know him, the actor from, the Partridge Family and all that stuff. That's sort of her claim to fame. But I like the fact that we gave Jill like actual teenage issues. You cheated on, you're one of my best friends, and you cheat on me with my boyfriend. You ignorant slut, leave me alone. And I mean, and I like that, and I love the fact that she's in trouble because remember when you could go over your minutes, like astronomically over your minutes? I mean, gosh, you hadn't got caught in that.
I know. What was so funny is I'm thinking as I'm like, how much was she talking to go over 800
she lays it out. She's like, I talked to you, Bobby, 256 minutes, 128. I mean, she, knows how many times she's talked to him.
It's so funny. And I'm just like, who goes over that much? But I was also going to say about the backstories and the characters and stuff, giving them a little bit of depth. One of the complaints we had about the first movie was they didn't ever really establish, was Jill like 16, 17 like this girl, where this Jill is. It's established. She's a teenager. She has teenage problems. She's in high school. She's on the track team, blah, blah, blah. But, with the one with Carol Kane, we never could, where, you said, well, it's never really established. Is she like a college student? Because you said one thing was you wouldn't think a high schooler would drink whiskey or scotch like she did.
The way she drank it didn't make sense. Like I say, they played her a little more adult than maybe she was,
Yeah.
And I like the fact that Jill, and they also solve another problem with this phone thing. And this is smart script writing here, okay? I mean, it may be, you may call it 101 or whatever, but it is a wise way to do it. Every kid in 2005, 2006 has a cell phone. And so they're like, well, hey, even if you're out in the boonies, you can try to get a signal. How do we get the cell phone out of the kid's hand? Oh, easy. We get dad to ground her. And hey, Avengers fans, there you go. There's
I know. I saw.
So I forgot he was in this. I was like, Agent Coulson, good to see you. He's in it for like 2 minutes, driving her to the place. But I like that, the fact that we're going to get the cell phone issue solved, because one, she's going to be in the middle of nowhere, and two, she doesn't have it anymore because her dad took it, shut off her service.
And I mean, I think you're right. That was very good script writing. That was very good for the plot. That moved the plot. That was the plot. She got her cell phone taken away because she went over by 800 minutes. And, I mean, I think that was very, very smart on the writer's part.
And the whole thing is we have to set up that Jill is going to have some way to stay in touch with her friends that night, that there's some reason for her to be talking to them. They're going to be at the big bonfire, homecoming, whatever it is. And she can't be there, obviously, because she's got to go babysit this doctor's kids, and it's a last minute thing, but the money apparently is good enough that it's going to allow her to pay that astronomical cell phone bill, which I was like, wow, what are they paying for babysitters these days? That's pretty impressive. But no matter what, you go with that because it makes sense and you're starting to buy it. And that's the first 20 minutes of this movie. Now, that is a real contrast to what we've had before. There's almost no tension other than that creepy little opening. And it's all about this girl and her little teenage problems, and it's like you're watching an episode of One Tree Hill.
Well, they're doing a better job of setting up the plot and setting up the story and setting up the characters with this remake than they did previously. I mean, the made-for-TV sequel, When a Stranger Calls Back, was just basically, it was the same setup. You know, you paid it off big in the beginning. You had a middle part trying to explain something, and then you had an end kind of chase finale thing.
Correct.
It was the same. It was the exact same formula, just the little details of it were different. This is something different. They did right. They explained and set stuff up at the beginning. Wow, like screenwriting 101 people, they did that. And then they gave plausible, and that was one of the complaints we had with the first one. This one gave plausible reasons why a teenager in 2005, 2006 wouldn't have a cell phone. They gave a plausible reason why she would be keeping in touch with her friends and stuff like that.
And they modernized this by doing something they know the audience wants, which is a body count. You have to have more than one off-screen death. You have to have something, but you have to have a reason for her friends to come over there. And it is a cheap setup. I mean, that's been a thing about horror movies really since like 87 is when you started to root for the killer to kill the people you didn't like from high school. Yeah. And the minute you meet Tiffany, you're like, yeah, she's so gonna have to die, because she, I thought Bobby may have to die too, but he doesn't actually ever make it to the house. But we had to have somebody else for him to kill, besides the random maid. That we'll get to that in a minute. But that I did like is that there's got to be a reason for these kids to want to interact with her still, and want to come to the house. But let's just back up a step here. After the doctor and his wife leave the house and Jill's kind of walking around and stuff, I love how she doesn't just sit there and start talking on the phone immediately. She does what I would imagine teenage girls would do in that elaborate of a house. She starts trying on all the fancy jewelry, and she's checking out the woman's elaborate bathroom, which that bathroom is huge. I had apartments smaller than that bathroom in my life. But I mean, that was an amazing thing. But I like that. Again, it's more just character stuff. And it's all before we get a single phone call, before anything else happens. And what it's doing for me, though, is it's giving Camilla Bell opportunity to build layers into herself as somebody who, she screwed up, she's taking responsibility for her actions, but she's also, she's a kid and she's hurt and she's mad and she's upset. And we're kind of seeing her sort of live out this little fantasy for a minute. And I like that they took time to do that. In a short movie, they took time to let her be a kid or be a teenage girl.
Well, oh shoot, I had the thought and it left my head. I'm sorry. But they're also giving us They're also giving us reasons to root for her, right, to want her, to pull for her, to like her, which is what you're supposed to do. You don't want someone in that role and the audience be like, oh my God, she's a bitch, I hope she dies. That's not good. So they're giving us reasons to root for her. We're seeing more of her character. We're seeing, that she, okay, she screwed up, but she's basically a good kid.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where we fall into the interesting part of this being a remake. There's a term like reboot, remake, reimagining. There's lots of different ways of looking at these things. And, this is not a reboot by any means. Even though at one time they were thinking about a sequel, they just never got it off the ground. I don't know what they would have done with it. I'm kind of glad that never happened. But this is definitely a reimagining. We're going to take the idea that was central and worked in the first one, and then we're going to build upon it. And I like that because it starts with how they build the tension of the calls. All right. And the first call that comes in and there's nothing. And it's just like the first film. They're pacing it almost similarly, but then the killer starts talking. And here's the one thing I'm going to ding this movie for, though. The stunt casting of Lance Henriksen as the voice of the stranger. If you watch horror movies, you watch sci-fi, you've seen Lance Henriksen. Nick and I talked a lot about him in the Alien series. He's in that one. He's, in 3 of those films. He's done a lot of other stuff, but he has this real distinct, very gravelly, smoke 20 Marlboros a day kind of voice. And the problem is, though, his delivery is so bad. It's like they got him off the street. He did 2 takes, and they got nothing out of him. There's no emotion to it. And I really, really... I miss the one thing I'm missing from the first film is that Kirk Duncan, Tony Beckley's voice, had this shaky, off-kilter strangeness to it. And Lance Henriksen sounds like somebody that's just trying to screw with you and scare you, just for fun.
Yeah, you can't take him seriously.
Oh, not
like
at all.
You could take Kirk Duncan seriously. That was I mean, like I said, that still haunts me. Probably my whole house is asleep, and when I'm walking to my room and past my children's room, I'm gonna hear that in my head.
And that's the effective part of that one. This one has none of that. And that's unfortunate because, we're talking about a movie here. This one has come out nearly 30 years since the first one. Good chance that majority of the target audience never saw the first one, don't know anything about it. And so they have no experience with it other than that dead, have you checked the children? It's awful how he sounds. And I just, it's the most unfortunate part of this film is because...
what would have been good if it was like somebody... Could you imagine if they did some like really major stunt casting and it was somebody like Johnny Depp?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you imagine how creepy that would sound? He would so pull it off. I think he could somebody like, I'm trying to think, like somebody like Johnny Depp.
You get him, or you get Alan Rickman, somebody.
Oh, yeah.
I'm almost cool with it being another British actor. Go with that voice again. But it's got, and I like the idea. The idea is that we got to get this scary voice. And Tommy Flanagan's voice apparently doesn't work for him. He does have that look because he's got that knife scar on his face, which apparently is very real. He got like outside of a bar one time or something. So he's got that weird look. But other than that, he just sort of moves creepily. And we don't ever get to hear his real voice talk. And the Lance Henriksen thing, it just never works because, and the best of this is at the climax. I said last time in the first film, they blew the climax of him on the phone with her when he says, "I want your blood all over me." That should be the end line, and then she runs out the house, which is essentially what happens here before their final fight. But the way he does that line is like, "I want your blood all over me." And it just deadpans, and she doesn't react to it at all. And I'm like, I don't blame you because I had no idea what he just said. It made that so pointless, and that's what I hated. Every conversation Carol Kane had with Kurt Duncan, you felt like there was an interaction happening. Here, you really get the feel that Camilla Bell doesn't know what she's supposed to be hearing on the other end.
Well, and true. And if I had one of my major complaints with this movie, and the biggest known name is who appears on the screen is basically Katie Cassidy, and then the guy from the Avengers for like a minute or two. So I'm not knocking anybody, but the acting could have been a little better. I don't know if this is because this is from mostly unknowns and this might have been their first thing, or it was a low budget film, or they're all young or whatnot. But the acting after a while kind of got on my nerves.
Camilla Bell has been around for a while. She started on TV back in the 90s when she was a kid, and she's kind of worked her way, up to semi-stardom and stuff. And she's been in a couple of big movies here and there and stuff. But she sort of always plays the sort of typified millennial generation emo girl, but one who looks pretty and doesn't totally go, all over the edge with it, but she's supposed to always she's got that kind of all permanent frown on her face, and she's always looks like she's angsty about something. That's what
she's kind of like Kristen Stewart.
There you go. Yeah, she's kind of a pre-runner.
Oh, Kristen Stewart gets on my nerves. Yeah, that's another podcast.
that's a way another podcast. But yeah, she definitely has that Kristen Stewart vibe going for her. She's a little bit older, but yeah, she came out before that, so that's a good way to describe her. And her performance is similar to that in here, though I would say she does. When she's allowed to act like a teenager, she has a lot more to do. When she's having to deal with him on the phone, there's just something that doesn't quite work about it. But like you said before, it goes by so dang fast, you really don't care. because it's all leading up to a chase, and there's a couple of chases and stuff. Now, what did you make of the fact that Tiffany comes over and they have that little talk, and then Tiffany gets ready to leave, and like I said, we got to have a body count, and we get her killed?
Well, I thought when I first before I realized what was going to happen, I thought that was kind of pointless. I'm like, why is she coming over? This is absolutely pointless. And then I also thought this is where it kind of gets non-plausible, or it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the plot. I'm like, okay, they're all supposed to be at this bonfire, right?
Right.
And why? And I mean, we had the 2 minutes of her dad driving and lecturing her up to this house in the middle of nowhere and telling her that the doctor will drive you back home because I don't want you driving at night and it's not safe. And so what if you don't have your car? It's not safe driving anyway. So, okay, what is going to possess this girl who apparently was her friend, but not a very good one because she made out with her boyfriend or whatnot, or made out with Bobby, and drive all the way out to this stupid house and in the middle of nowhere just to tell her, hey, I kissed him because I went out for him with one day and then he dumped me to go out with you or whatever.
Well,
I just thought that was kind of stupid.
It's convenient. You're not wrong. They want a convenient reason to have her out there, to have a body count. She's already been made out to be despicable. We're not supposed to like her, and we have to have some reason for her to die. But
well, see, I don't think they did a very good job at the beginning of saying how despicable she was, because it's just kind of like a teenage. I think they even said something, this is so high school, and I think Jill goes, Jill or Scarlett says we are in high school.
And I like that little call out, but I'm with you. They could have used a minute or two more to establish the friendship and how maybe it had been damaged.
Yeah.
And I needed Tiffany to have a little more of a, hey, let's go party and be friends, a little less of that and more of a, hey, I'm really sorry, and then they kind of kiss and make up, and then she goes on her way, because as it is, Jill is like, you got to go because I'm going to get in trouble if you're here and I can't blow this. And so that's why she leaves, and she walks into the death trap, which is out of every slasher film ever. The killer sets up something for you to go and investigate, and then that's how you get killed.
Well, and then the other thing that got me is, I don't live on a creepy. Well, I think my neighborhood's kind of creepy. I take that back, but it's nothing creepy like this movie. And we're all like normal looking, normal houses. But I just thought it was me if I'm here by myself, or it's just me and the kids, and my husband's out of town or something. And granted, I have a much smaller house than the one in this movie, and nor do I have all the glass all over. But if my alarm went off, or if my alarm went off in my house, I would be grabbing my kids and busting through a window or something. I wouldn't be so nonchalant. That was something that struck me too when the alarm went off, that she was so nonchalant, and the mom called and was so nonchalant about it. Like, oh yeah, I told Rosie that, Rosie or Rosa? Rosa. I told Rosa, I don't know how many times I've told Rosa not to do that and blah, 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 blah. I wouldn't care. I would have got those kids. I would have called the police. And then also the other thing is, like, my alarm the alarm company did call. I would have told the alarm company, I don't know, call the police. And then
she plays off like she knows way too much about this house for having been given a 5-minute tour of it.
Yeah, I was kind of like,
this is
that
the
was
other
kind
thing.
of like a.
Like we talked about before, it would have been cool if Jill, or even in the last one, if Julia had like known the family and like there was a relationship. This should have been like, why do I have to go out to the Mandrakis' place, Dad? They're weird. Like, just 1 or 2 lines, and then we would have been like, oh, she knows these people. And that's how they got hooked up with her. I mean, we needed for a slim movie, they could have thrown us a line or two to fix that little plot hole. Because I'm with you, a lot of this stuff starts happening for convenience. And it's there for one reason only, though. And it's called opening weekend screams. All right, there's nothing like people who walk in who say, hey, let's go see a scary movie, sure. And they have no idea what it's about, and it jumps out at them and gets them. And so that is one of those things that builds false tension, and it gets you to sort of go like, oh, there's really nothing there. Then when the guy does come out from around the corner and grabs her hair and all that stuff, it makes that so much more tense. But that's all it's there for. It's cheap scares, and that's just a horror movie trick, and it's part of this era. But I'll go with it because as things begin to escalate, I'm starting to get really involved. Because the one thing Jill does well here is she has the same thing Carol Kane did. When she starts calling the cops, she starts to feel really helpless. Like, I've called the people I should call, and they're useless to me. Again, I've got to keep him on the phone. How do I do that? Well, figure something out. That's all it is. And I like the fact that it's set up, Jill, you've got to take responsibility for yourself, And then she starts doing the things like you said. She's checking on the kids. She's looking around the corner. She's waiting, and she keeps getting these weird calls, and it gets weirder and weirder. And as she goes around, she has that whole seeing somebody in the guest house, and it turns out to be their son who's not supposed to be there or something like that. And then she can't find the maid, and that's when everything starts breaking loose on her. And I'll tell you, if they had gone 3 or 4 more minutes there in the middle, I'm with you. I was starting to go like, okay, let's get somewhere, please.
Yeah.
And then they turn the flames on, because the third act of this is really him chasing her through the house. And aside from the bad Lance Hendrickson voice phone calls, every bit of that works for me. I like it. I like all of the little fights they get in, and I like how she finds the dead bodies and all that stuff. He's left them there to scare her some more, and I buy it. I'm going with it.
And what I liked about this is that in their interaction is one of the complaints we had about, and I said this before about the second movie especially, is she doesn't play a victim. She as I joke with my kids or my coworkers, I'm like, she puts her big girl panties on and she gets those kids and she does what she needs to do to protect. She does what she thinks she can do to protect them. She doesn't, it's not like in the first movie with Carol Kane where Jill's looking up and barely sees him and opens the door and runs into one of the cops or something. It's she does what any responsible, I would think, 16-year-old babysitter would do. She takes care, or any responsible person would do.
This is totally a lift off of the Laurie Strode character from the original Halloween, and to some extent Ripley in Aliens, but it's really more Laurie Strode, because if you watch the original Halloween, there's a point where she locks the kids in the bathroom, and then she fights Michael Myers, and she stabs him, thinks she's killed him, and she goes and gets him. And she's like, kids, are you okay? Are you okay? Okay, I want y'all to run across the street. And she gets them out of the house. Like, she's constantly sort of huddling the kids together and making sure they're okay. And I like that Jill did that. She's like, I'm not letting anything happen to these kids. I'm getting these kids, and we're getting out of this house. And I'm with you.
She's not a victim, and I really like that about this. I really like that in this movie.
Yeah, it makes it much more interesting, because again, it gives you something to buy into her. Now you root for her. You're like, you got to get the kids out of the house. Come on, Jill, get the kids out of the house. And as it just keeps going on, and I like the fight in the greenhouse too, that he's in there and he drags her down under the water, and she's got all the sprinklers going, and the way like he catches her hair as she's running through the door and essentially rips it out. I thought, God, that's really just ugh. And I bought that, because for a movie that's relatively bloodless, to be PG-13, they do a lot of things to get your goat. And I dug all of that. I like the fact that she fights back with him, because we're paying off the fact that, look, this girl's an athlete. She's not just some chick that walked up off the street. So she could, we talked about how Tracy could beat Kurt Duncan in the ground, right? Jill might not have beat him, but she knew how to get around him.
Oh, yeah.
So,
that's my husband and I were actually joking this evening. I was complaining to him about something, and I was like, you know what? I I'm halfway joking. I never do this, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna kick your butt. And he's like, don't. He's like, go ahead and try. I can outrun you. So
Yeah, that may be true actually. So,
yeah, that is
consider how
true.
far and how fast he can run. But,
Yeah.
but I like that. This guy is bigger than Jill. I mean, Camilla Bell is small. She's a little
yeah.
pixie.
Oh,
But-
and I do. I mean, I was gonna go back to this at this point too, but at where she's running around that track,
yeah,
how small she. I mean, and she's not like America's Next Top Model, anorexic small.
It's like 5 feet tall, small. She's just small.
She's a petite woman.
Exactly. She's just petite. And this guy, Tommy Flanagan's kind of a tall, wiry guy, but he's big. And so when he lowers himself down in front of her, he's a big dude, and that I liked the fact that she was going to have to use her smarts and her speed to outdo his strength. And that's ultimately what happens. I mean, and she grabs that poker and stabs him and then lights turns the fire furnace on and it kind of blows up in his face. And I like that. I like that satisfying ending and the fact that the cops actually show up and do something. This movie ends like it's supposed to. The cops arrest the guy. They don't, the fat cop doesn't roll in and shoot him. Jill doesn't commit murder.
And the old, no, you forgot old and fat.
Yeah, the old and fat guy doesn't shoot him. And some random other person doesn't intervene for Jill. Agent Coulson doesn't show back up and blast him. She doesn't pick up a gun and commit murder as a 16-year-old. She stabs him and she gets the heck out of the place. And, she defends herself, defends those kids, gets out of there, and then the cops are there and they take the guy away, and that's when we get that one shot of his face, which you can tell just creeps her out even more. I thought that was great. And then we get that little coda. And what did you make of the little dream sequence fake out thing at the end?
I don't know, that kind of almost ruined it for me. It's cool, it's kind of cool, but it kind of almost ruined it. But the more I think about it, the more I think it makes sense.
Well, I like the fact that they go with the fact that she is now damaged from this. That you don't just go through this and then, okay, I'm fine. Because in this film's era, that would be what happens. We just shot everybody in the face. Now we're all okay. Let's go party. That isn't what's going to happen. She's screwed up from this. And it leaves it on that real John.
And it's believable.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it's like the best thing, if it's the best plot point to do, but it, like you're saying, it is believable. I mean, it was very hard to believe that in the first one that, that a horrible thing happened. And, I mean, like in the first one, even she got out of the house and the kids were all mangled and stuff. So it's hard to believe that didn't. And I think that's one thing that's more believable in even the second one and the reimagined one. It seemed like in the first one that didn't bother Jill. She went about her life. She became a philanthropist. Her husband got a promotion and blah, 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 blah.
It didn't bother her until she got that phone call and she lost her mind at the restaurant. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, it was like repressed memory, but they did nothing to set that up.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Even the second one was more believable where, she became this with drawn college student and stuff, and that's and she needed a counselor and all this stuff. That makes sense. This makes sense.
I mean, they didn't credit Fred Walton for any of this, but the people that made this movie obviously watched the other one, and I would think they maybe even saw the second one and realized there's stuff here we can play on. We can work with this. And I like at the end, I know it's the big fake out. It's always the big cheat to have the hallucination last scare. There's always one last scare, but I like that they leave it with that John Carpenter-esque, very dour ending. We don't know if she's completely lost her mind now. What's going to become of her? One of her best friends has been killed. She's seen dead bodies all over the place. She's been attacked. She's going to struggle with some traumatic stress. And I like that it's basically them trying to strap her down and medicate her back to sleep at the end. It gives it a real dark ending. I mean, it's kind of neat.
And it makes it more like a psychological thriller than a horror movie.
Right.
Sometimes.
The stakes all pay off to something.
That is how, could you imagine if they had this script, but had Carol Kane and the Carol Kane and the guy who played Kurt Duncan.
Yeah.
And how creepy that would, how that would have worked if they had that house and this script and set it up like that. And how good that movie would have been.
Well, and it's why I'm hoping somewhere down the line they go back to this again. Hollywood recycles everything. If they go back to it one more time, they might get it perfect the next time around, because this is closer, but it's still not perfect. So,
oh yeah, if we're on a scale of 1 to 10 and 10 is perfect, this is a solid 8.5, almost a 9.
Well, that's an interesting way to segue into final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. So what are yours for When a Stranger Calls, the 2006 remake?
I'm going to give it a large with no butter. And I was going to say like a medium and a half. So I'm like a large, no butter. Because I don't like the horror genre, because I'm a big old chicken, big old scaredy cat. But I really liked this movie. The script was good. For a horror movie, the script was good. I mean, and I was thinking this as we're doing the podcast. I mean, you can kind of sometimes equate these scripts and, these bloody, gushy movies to basically porn. It's just the other side. It's just the other side of the spectrum. But I mean, the script was good. The plot was good. Yeah, the acting was so-so, but they did a lot of stuff right. They made the house a character. The house became its own kind of character and its own kind of creepiness, and they did a lot of stuff right. So I would give it, like you said, it's not perfect. There's still some things you could, there's some things to complain about, but all in all, it's good. And I don't typically like this genre, so I didn't think it was that bad. Well, so I give it a large with no butter.
I'm going to go large with butter. I think it's just a large popcorn. I mean, it's a good movie. And I think this gets panned again because of some of those stigmas that it has PG-13. It's teen horror from that era. Oh, it's got to be awful. And it's really not. It's really good. And it's worth a watch. If you saw it when it came out and you were like, yeah, I don't know, rewatch it. Or if you've never seen it and you're following this with us, for the first time like Anna's been, this one's definitely worth a look. I mean, I don't know that I could ever tell anybody you have to watch the first one completely through. You watch the first 20 minutes, you kind of got it. There's no reason at all to ever see the second one. You've heard us talk about it. This one's one you can watch, and I think it's a good, fun watch. It's a popcorn movie in every sense. I mean, it's just there for that kind of good, cheap thrill, and it's one of those fun ones. It's not on TV much, but you can find it in the cheap bin at your local video store and stuff, folks. So video store, God, do those even exist? You can find it in like the cheap bin at the DVD.
Yeah, they existed back when you could go over by 800 minutes.
This is true. So, but it's definitely worth a watch. I recommend it. I think it's good, and I give it large popcorn. It's not perfect though, and that's why I say if they want to go back to this again, they've got the right script. I don't even know that they need to change that. Just update it a little bit.
Oh, they got the right set too.
Yeah, they got the right set. You got to get a little bit better on the actor side and do the stunt casting with the voice right. And I think you got to get an actor that can play both parts. I think you got to get somebody that can be creepy with their voice and then with their body too. You get that right. Like you say, you'll never get a guy like Johnny Depp, but if you can think like the poor man's version of that somewhere out there, that's the way to go. Somebody that people will recognize that, oh, God, he's the bad guy. Like Kiefer Sutherland has done this in his later career. Keanu Reeves did it. Those kind of guys. Get those guys to do it. Ethan Hawke, somebody like that. And it would be really interesting. I think this movie could
Ethan Hawke would be good.
I think this movie could work again. And I hope to see it come around one more time because this one is satisfying. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say something. I think this one's more satisfying as a rewatch than the second one and even the first one. And I'm a big fan of that first one. But this is a better quality film all the way. and I would never tell you otherwise. So it's a recommend, large popcorn from me too. So, well, Anna, I know it's not your thing, but it's been really fun talking about When a Stranger Calls with you. So
It has been. It wasn't as bad as I thought.
And so I'm hoping maybe just maybe we can sneak a couple more of these in on you down the line somewhere. So, but we got one more thing coming out for Shocktober for you folks. You know, Brian and I have toiled away. It's time for the Little Green Friend. Yes, on Halloween.
I knew you were gonna say
Yep, we have watched and we will now have Leprechaun 4 in space for you for Halloween. Our little gift to you. So enjoy.
Whoa, back up. You said in space?
It is in space, yes.
I wish someone could see my face laughing.
Well, I can't promise I laughed while watching it, but I'm sure we'll have laughs as we talk about it.
That just sounds so sad. Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I got to take a step back here and say, what executive, someone came to them and goes, okay, we're going to do a fourth Leprechaun, but they're going to be in space.
Here's the actual story of how it happened. An artist worked at the studio, and he saw a picture of the Apollo 13 poster, and he drew the Leprechaun's face over Tom Hanks' face, and someone said, I like it, do it. That's exactly how that movie got made.
Well, that's like the story about Talladega Nights with they were like Will Ferrell and as a NASCAR driver. Someone greenlit it, which I love that movie.
Well, that movie is far superior to Leprechaun 4. Spoiler. But anyway,
I think the Kim Kardashian sex tape is far superior.
I wouldn't know. You can tell us all about that in your own retrospective.
No, I wouldn't know either. But I just have a feeling.
Well, it's going to be a fun ride. The last three have been fun with Brian and I, and so folks, that'll be out for Halloween. Then we'll start getting ready for our big Stephen King retrospective that Nick and I are going to do. We've always got other things up our sleeves, though. You never know what we're going to come up with. It'll be more holiday time, so we may actually do like real holiday films this year. You never know. I mean, at Film Strip, we kind of just hit the variety button and see what happens. Check out our archives on our website, continuousplaypodcast.com/movies. And hey, if you're a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, our sister podcast, The Art of Slaying, is part of the Continuous Play universe. You can listen to 4 full seasons of episode reviews, and as of the release of this, we're getting right there close to the release of season 5 stuff. So all that there available for you at our website. Check up with us on Facebook and Twitter. You can follow what we're going to be working on next. We'll ask you questions, all that stuff. Leave us feedback. Let us know what you think. As always, we do this for fun, and we do it because you guys enjoy it too. So until next time, for Anna, I'm Jay. Thanks for tuning in to Film Strip.
Thanks for listening to Film Strip. Visit our website, continuousplaypodcast.com, for more reviews and episodes.
It's only a movie. It's only a movie.
All content used or discussed in this podcast are the property of their respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504c2, Title 17.